This is our 5-minute presentation on the sulfur cycle. Let's dive in. The sulfur cycle is the biogeochemical cycle by which sulfur is exchanged between the biotic and abiotic components of the Earth ecosystem. It involves a series of processes that transform sulfur compounds from one form to another, and through which sulfur moves between different reservoirs in the environment, including the atmosphere, water bodies, soil, and living organisms. Sulfur is an essential element for life. It is a key component of many important biomolecules such as proteins and nucleic acids. It accounts for 1% of the dry weight of bacteria. The sulfur cycle starts with release of sulfur from rocks and minerals through weathering and erosion. The process releases sulfates and sulfides into the soil and water. Sulfur can also be released into the atmosphere through the burning of fossil fuels, volcanic eruptions, and natural and human activities. Sulfur dioxide and sulfur trioxide can be converted into sulfuric acid through reactions with water vapor in the atmosphere, forming acid rain. Sulfur can also be cycled through water bodies where it can be converted into hydrogen sulfide by anaerobic bacteria, then back into sulfate through oxidation by aerobic bacteria. Human activities such as the burning of fossil fuels and industrial processes have greatly affected the sulfur cycle by releasing large amounts of sulfur dioxide and other sulfur compounds into the atmosphere. This has led to environmental problems such as acid rain and formation of sulfuric acid aerosols.
When sulfur is being cycled throughout the environment, it can have different transports and lifetimes depending on the physiochemical conditions it is in. Understanding sulfur sinks is important because any variation can have drastic environmental effects on life and climate. One of those sulfur reservoirs is the atmosphere. Volcanoes outgas sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. Gas that isn't cycled by microbes or dissolved by water gets transported into the atmosphere, where they have half lives of 10 days and 18 hours, respectively. There are also sea salt aerosols and gas from biodegraded organic matter, but their contributions are very small. Anthropogenic sources also add sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide through strip mining and the burning of fossil fuels. Half of sulfur dioxide measured in the atmosphere is currently from the burning of fossil fuels. Because of their short atmospheric lifetimes, the atmosphere is a small reservoir for sulfur at 1.4 million tons. Most gas expelled from volcanoes get dissolved in the oceans and aquifers, resulting in sulfate. Sulfates also occur from weathering and precipitation. This culminates in a large reservoir that has an important role in marine life. 1.2 times 10 to the 15 tons of sulfur is stored in the ocean, where it is cycled over 8.7 million years. The lithosphere contains the largest reservoir of sulfur. Once soluble metal sulfides are formed, they are deposited as sediments in aquatic environments. They sink to the benthic zone and accumulate and eventually cement into sedimentary rock. Sulfur sinks in the lithosphere contain 1.8 times 10 to the 16 tons. In aqueous environments, microbes uptake sulfur for growth. Sulfur reducing bacteria have the ability to turn organic matter into hydrogen sulfide, helping to recycle sulfur. This makes biomass and organic matter two large sulfur sinks with a total of 2.4 times 10 to the 10 tons in the hydro and
So
lithosphere.
here we're going to be talking about sulfur assimilation. This happens in many microorganisms where reduced is used to then make a new amino acid. The process starts with sulfate entering the cell. The sulfate then reacts with ATP to form APS. Then another ATP molecule reacts with APS to transform it into PAPS. Then this new PAPS is reduced into sulfite. It is then further reduced into sulfide, and then when it's at the sulfide, one common amino acid that removes this sulfide and reduces it further is serine, And when it reacts with serine, it forms a new amino acid named cysteine. Next, we're going to be talking about sulfur mineralization. This process is to release sulfur from organic compounds. So the first process on here is the breakdown of cysteine. It breaks down into from its organic component into serine and then hydrogen sulfide. The second process is hydrogen sulfide or DMS, which is dimethyl sulfide, which are two volatile compounds that are found in the atmosphere. When they react with UV light, they form sulfate, and then when sulfate reacts with water, it forms sulfuric acid. And the last one, the process starts with the combustion, with the fossil fuel combustion. It then produces sulfur dioxide, and when sulfur dioxide reacts with water, it produces sulfurous acid.
Sulfur oxidation is a chemical process that involves the conversion of elemental sulfur or sulfide minerals into sulfate compounds. This process occurs naturally in a variety of environments, such as in the ocean, soil, volcanic areas, as well as in industrial processes. Chemotrophic sulfur oxidation is a biological process in which certain bacteria and organisms use sulfur compound as a source of energy for the metabolism and convert them into organic matters. This process is a type of chemostatics, which is a process of synthesizing organic compound from organic molecule using energy from chemical reaction instead of sunlight. Phototrophic sulfur oxidation is a process in which certain bacteria and algae uses sunlight as energy sources to oxidize sulfur compounds and produce organic matters. This process is a type of photogenesis, which is the process of converting sunlight into chemical energy that can be used to synthesize organic matters.
The final piece of the sulfur cycle is the reduction process. Dissimilatory pathways utilize two inorganic forms of sulfur as terminal electron acceptors. These two types are elemental sulfur and sulfate. The two metabolisms are differentiated as sulfur respiration and dissimilatory sulfate reduction. The use of sulfate as a terminal electron acceptor is the most important when looking into the environmental processes we discussed. These organisms are known as sulfate reducing bacteria and are integral to this part of the process. They function in anaerobic conditions, and the equation shown demonstrates their abilities to utilize H2 as an electron donor in order to power reduction. Sulfate and sulfur reducers are considered to be anaerobic chemoheterotrophic organisms that use these carbon substrate byproducts of fermentation, which are shown on the slide. These unique abilities have shown to be able to metabolize even more complex carbon compounds, leading to its use in remediation efforts. Specifically, SRBs are being utilized in the remediation of highly anaerobic contaminated sites, such as acid mine tailings, where they are eliminating toxic metals through dissolution and precipitation. To conclude, the cycle ends in a byproduct of hydrogen sulfide, which can be taken up by chemo and photoautotrophs and reoxidized, volatilized into the atmosphere, or will react with metal sulfides and lead to corrosion. Thank you very much for listening.